Hi, everybody. Welcome to week 6. Just a friendly reminder, we have our exam this week, so please make sure that's downloaded and ready to go for your test on this week. We're going to take a look this week on educating in the community and what that will look like. So I'm going to share with you our PowerPoints, and we will take a look at chapter 13 to begin. So in chapter 13, it's community assessment and evaluation. So when we're looking at a community, we're looking at some different things that are important. For example, we're taking a look at the public health nurse, and we see our community as a client who was able to identify and harness the strengths present to meet the challenges faced by the community. We use the nursing process to promote a community's health. This chapter will go over some community concepts, community as a client, and the role that we as nurses play in it. So there are many definitions of community. At its simplest, community is a group of people, as in a defined population, that shares something in common, such as geographic location, interest, or values. Our World Health Organization will define community as a group of people often living in a defined geographic area who may share a common culture, values, and norms, are arranged in a social structure according to relationships with the community has over time. We look at an aggregate, and that's going to be a population or group of individuals in the community who share personal or environmental characteristics. When we take a look at defining community within an assessment, we're going to be looking for community really as a specific population with an aggregate with specific characteristics that live within an area and organization will share. So we have our people, place, and function. These are going to be our 3 common factors that we look at. We know community is a concept rather than a specific place. So people living in the same place may describe their community very differently. Understanding the many identities of community is part of the community assessment, and so something we want to be careful when we're looking at. We see community as a client. So community practice setting is an insufficient reason for saying that practice is oriented toward the community client when the location of the practice is in the community, but the focus is on the individual or family. So when we're focusing on community as a client, we have direct, primary, secondary, and tertiary preventions that can be part of our population-focused health practice. So examples of direct care might be spousal abuse, elder abuse, and we see it with TB treatment. Community as a client, sometimes interventions are provided, and because their health needs are commonly related problems, changes in individuals will ultimately affect the health of the community. So we view the community as client, and thus the target of service means a commitment to 2 key concepts. We take a look at community health and we look at partnerships, and we know that these 2 concepts help to form the goal for community health, but that our population-centered practice or our partnership is important. So goals and means of the community as a client, and again, we're population-centered practice. Nurses may work with individual families or other groups or institutions. We're going to see a change to affect the whole community. And we do assessment findings that guide actions of assurance. So community health is reflected in the health behaviors and subsequent outcomes of its residents and the ability for them to support healthy individuals. We take a look at Healthy People 2030. We know it offers a vision for the future for healthy communities and specific objectives that we are going to have to fulfill that. We know that in community partnerships, we need to bring changes that will help with our Healthy People 2030. We have our partnering with community members. Community partnerships is a key element that we know as well for our interventions. And so we take a look there at our different things. So know that some of our communities assessments feature community partnerships such as MAP, which is in our book. And coalitions are active partnership in which all participants share leadership and decision-making to some degree. So we know, unfortunately, some community health efforts view community residents only as sources of information, but this limits it to make it passive. And so we want to remember that we want to keep it active. So our community is involved. Purpose of our community assessments is to learn more about community needs and strengths. We know that we should look at those that are high on the list, while knowing that sometimes it's hard to value those. Communities have both resources and needs, so a balanced approach to the assessment is necessary, and we want to identify problems that for positive change. We focus on setting our priorities, and our organizations may help to complete our community assessments as well. When we look at community as a partner, this process is going to require clinical judgment and critical appraisal, and it requires a clear knowledge and understanding of the community. So we take a look at our primary sources of data, which are collected directly through interaction with community members or leaders. So we see participant observation, windshield surveys, key informant interviews, focus groups, secondary analysis of data and surveys. And then we have our secondary data, which we take a look at and see obtained through existing reports, including census, vital statistics, morbidity and mortality among a group of people. So something that we want to look at when we're taking a look as community as the partner. In addition, we have health indicators, which are going to be our numerical measures of health outcomes. So we'll see morbidity and mortality, determinants of health, and population characteristics. We take a look at community as a partner, and we know that our health assessment model is what we follow here. We conduct a community assessment. Our first step is always going to be defining our community and geographic boundaries, the population within the boundaries, the purpose of the assessment, and to identify a data collection plan. We continue on for our community diagnosis, which is going to be on the aggregate level, and we have our identification of health assets and challenges. We are going to prioritize during that. When we look at our nursing diagnoses, we're going to have them relate to the problem, relate to factors or stressors, and the supporting data that the document the problem. So here's an example of one. It's increased level of infant mortality in community X related to inadequate access to prenatal care, high teen birth rate, and few obstetrical providers in the city, as evidenced by infant mortality of eight infant deaths per 1,000 live births, a preterm rate of 15%, teen birth rate of 75 out of 1,000 females, and 3 obstetric providers for a population of 30,000. So very specific there. The planning and implementation strategies we know are based on the community problems and its strengths, as well as the priorities of the community members. If the identified problem is not resolved to the satisfaction of the community at large, program implementation, the public health nurse will return to the data gathering phase and begin it again for updated. So it's an ongoing circular process when we're doing this with our planning, implementation, and our evaluation. And our last slide is going to talk about personal safety and community practice. So it's a prerequisite for effective community-oriented practice. Personal safety is always concerned. 3 sources of information that we know about a community would be through our community members, through observations, and other nurses, social work, or healthcare providers who are familiar with the given community. So that about takes us through community assessment and evaluation and how we see it, and what we as public health nurses will do to implement that in process. So we're going to take a look at a little video before we start 14, because 14 is going to be more about educating. So I'm going to share that with you, and we'll take a look at that video. And let me just make sure I'm sharing my screen. Okay, and we'll take a look at this video. This is going to be our 3 domains again of learning, which we talked about earlier in the semester, but we're going to take a look at that now.
Conveniently divides a cute fluffy chicken into delicious pieces. Academics divide the mechanisms of human learning into 3 domains: cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. The cognitive domain involves intellectual skills and organizes those skills in a hierarchy based on degree of complexity. Relatively simple skills, such as the learning and recalling of the facts, are placed at the bottom of the hierarchy, while more complex skills, such as analysis and synthesis, are placed on the top. Not surprisingly, this domain is most often the focus of the educational system. For example, a student of literature might first memorize facts about Hamlet. Later, that student would write essays analyzing the theme of revenge or some other crap. At the highest level, the student would draw from the lower level skills to create original works of literature, preferably superior to those god-awful Twilight books. Sparkly vampires, Seriously? The psychomotor domain involves the adoption of skills requiring hand-eye coordination and other physical tasks. It doesn't have a whole lot to do with library instruction, so we're going to skip right on over to...
Ooh, the affective domain! Yay! Which involves attitudes and values. It describes how people progress from ignorance of a subject to making that subject an integral part of who they are. At the lower levels, a person learns that a subject exists, chooses to pay attention to it, and responds to it with goodwill. At higher levels, the person makes an effort to interact with the subject, eventually making it a determining force in his or her life. For example, that same student of literature would begin by becoming aware that Hamlet exists, decide to read it, and enjoy the experience. Later, the student would acquire other plays and read them, maybe attend a performance. At the highest level, the student would come to appreciate literature as something of enduring value and make it a permanent part of his or her life.
This three-way division.
Okay, so that just covers our 3 domains of learning once again, and we're going to do that prior to taking a look at our chapter 14, which is going to be health education in our community. So we'll take a look at that one, and this is chapter 14, so please make sure that you're reading both chapters and making sure you're keeping up with the reading. Okay, so we take a look at the way people learn, and we're going to see this as the way people learn. So we know that nurses working in education are going to provide information to enable clients to attain health and health problems. Education is going to allow our individuals to make informed health-related decisions, and we're going to look at ways that we develop education. With our Healthy People 2030 objectives, we know that they emphasize the importance of educating different populations. Community-based educational programs can often be met and maintain many of these objectives. So we take a look at the different steps that we use when we're developing a health education program. We need to identify a population and the specific learning needs. We're going to select one or more learning theories to use in the education program. We're going to consider which educational principles are most likely to increase learning, and then we're going to examine educational issues, design and implement the program, and evaluate our effects. So when we do that, we know that we are going to have learning, which is going to be our education, which is our activity that's designed to change knowledge and skill and attitudes of people or communities. And so we arrange our events to facilitate learning with their prior knowledge and their skills. So we take another look again that there's a difference between education and learning. And we know that learning is the process of gaining knowledge. So we need to see measurable changes in behavior over time. One way to think about the nature of learning is to think about our 3 domains that we've talked about. We have our cognitive, which is our thinking. We have our affective, which is our feeling. And we know it's oftentimes difficult to change because of attitudes, beliefs, interests, and values. And then our psychomotor, where we're actually using our ability to think and to move, a sensory image of how to carry out a skill, and it gives us opportunities to practice new skills. So each domain has specific levels. We know about Bloom's taxonomy, and each level is going to build on the one beneath it. So when we think about our adults and their motivation to learn, we know what we hear is often filtered. So we need to take a look at, they think they need to know something, if they think new information is important for life experiences, if they value the person giving the information, and they believe they can make any changes with the program. So we look at ways of developing our effective health programs. First, we're going to send a clear message to our learner. We're going to make sure we use the most appropriate learning format. We're being sensitive to reading levels and age and all those kind of things. We're going to look at environment. Where would it be? Is it in the home? Is it in a classroom? Experience, participation. We want active participation with the learner, and evaluating, giving back feedback. So we take a look at our teach-monomics, which is going to be tune in. So listen before you start teaching, because we want our needs directed toward the client. We're going to edit, teach things as you have planned, and make changes as you're going. We're going to act on each teaching moment, clarify often, and honor the client as a partner. So we take a look at considering age, gender, culture, developmental or special learning needs, education level before we plan that. The educator needs to understand the basic sequence of instruction. So skills of an effective educator: gain the attention of the learners, tell the learners your objective, stimulate recall of prior learning, present the essential materials, help learners to apply the information to their lives, encourage learners to demonstrate what they have learned with our teach back method, where they're going to teach back to you what you've taught them, and then provide feedback is always helpful. Some issues that we encounter are population considerations, age, culture, ethnicity. We want to make sure that we're trying to overcome barriers to learning and using technology as we may need. So educator-related barriers to learning would be, what are you doing as the educator that is creating a barrier? So if you're not comfortable with public speaking, you don't have a lot of credibility with the topic, lack of knowledge, lack of experience, uncomfortable when someone asks a question, not prepared for use of the media equipment, and all those kind of things are going to be related. When we take a look at our motivation and our 3 factors, the value component, why am I learning this? The expectant, how can I do this? Or can I do this? And the effective, how do I feel about this? So we know we have low literacy as a concern, and so we have to be sensitive to that when we're teaching. And lack of motivation to learn. Think about the reasons why our clients are not interested in learning or think important. So we have 2 models. We look at the health belief model and stages of change model. And we're going to take a look at technology and education. So we know that some people may want to. These technologies may enable them to control the pace of their instruction, like we're doing online education with our class. And we also know that depending on the different age categories, like our baby boomers may like more of like paper reading, that kind of thing, while our Generation X is going to want to be actively involved, doing something to participate. So online technology, gives immediate feedback sometimes if you're using that in your teaching. So according to the National National Library of Medicine, things to consider when we're looking at our health information on the internet, to be real careful with that. And we know our accuracy, is it right? The authority, who's saying it, biases, currency, and timelessness, and then coverage. So we look at all 3 of those when we're evaluating online health information. So evaluation is a systematic and logical way that we look at to improve the educational program. So we look at different approaches. So we can use questionnaires, we can do rating scale surveys, checklists, skills demonstration, testing, feedback, observation, those kind of things when we're doing it. So we choose the method of evaluation based on the situation. So for example, when evaluating a person's ability to perform a psychomotor skill, we want to see them actually do it, and when they're actively doing it in their lifetime. So nurses will often provide health education to groups. We do know that, and we want to take a look at that we have collective interests, needs, and values of the individuals that make a link between the individual and the social system. Group support often helps people make their necessary changes. And we take a look at groups are an effective way to have changes for individuals, families, organizations, and the community at whole. So we look at our member interaction, our cohesion, group culture, role structure, and the leadership. Our last 2 slides are going to look at changing groups for health change. So health behavior is influenced by the groups for which we're surrounded by. So we want to know that choosing groups for health change would be with established groups and membership groups. And when we see conflict, we need to know that conflict is normal when working with a group. So we just look for strategies for change and to evaluate our group progress. So I'm going to stop sharing with you guys there. This will take us to the end of the lecture for week number 6. Please remember you have your exam this week, so you will be studying. Any questions, you know how to contact me. And please do your reading for the chapters that you have due. Take care, and I'll see you all this week.